To prove the girl was his wife from a past life, he broke into her room in the dead of night. But the moment his feet touched the floor, she was wide awake. She had been a soldier in her past life, after all. She grabbed the weapon she'd wheedled out of her brother when she first arrived, a comfort for her lack of security that she never thought she'd actually use. Feeling the intruder behind her, she slashed backward with the blade, but it missed by a hair. It was too dark to see his face. Without hesitating, she attacked again, but this time her wrist was caught in an iron grip. He used the momentum to push her down onto the bed, just as she was about to scream. The man spoke her name from her previous life. "Shuxian, it really is you. Did you think I wouldn't recognize my own wife's guiding?" Aylin's mind went completely blank. "Why aren't you saying anything?" Hill reached out and touched the corner of her lips. "The evidence is right here." The sensation at the cut on her lip made her falter, and her guiding energy flowed out instinctively. The two of them were instantly connected. The familiar feeling made Hill tremble with relief, his head tilting back in pure bliss. The side effects from years of using his powers vanished in an instant. In that moment, he was certain this girl was his deceased wife. He was an S-class sentinel with dual abilities. Sentinels are born with immense power, but overuse can lead to mental chaos that only a guide can soothe. Without timely guiding, they lose control and go berserk, just like her husband had in their past life. As a B-class guide, she stood no chance of stopping a berserk S-class sentinel, but the thought of him dying was unbearable. She had plunged into the sea of fire, pushing through the searing heat until she finally reached his side and began to guide him without a second of hesitation. It felt like embracing a raging inferno. Even as she felt her own body melting away, she never stopped. As she was about to lose consciousness, she finally said the words she had always wanted to tell him but never had. "Maybe you never loved me, but thank you for always being by my side." With her last ounce of strength, she kissed his cheek. "I can finally let go of my feelings for you. Goodbye, my love." She prayed to God, asking that in her next life, she would be born into a warm family and meet a man who truly loved her. When Hill regained his senses, the first thing he saw was his wife's body, burned beyond recognition. The moment he realized the person in his arms was gone, the rage he'd just suppressed exploded again, several times stronger than before, like a volcano of boiling lava. His eyes burned with a furious hatred, as if he wanted to incinerate the entire world. The world went dark once more. The magnificent imperial palace was hosting the grandest banquet in its history, and nobles from all over had flocked to attend. The sleeping girl was gently shaken awake. Aylin was her name in this life. It seemed God had heard her wish. This time, she not only had parents who doted on her, but an older brother as well. Little sister is gorgeous even when she's just woken up. She really wanted to throw the cheesy guy out. Her mother scolded him, telling him to be serious. "I'm just telling the truth, right, Dad?" Her doting father puffed out his chest proudly. "Of course! How could my daughter be anything but beautiful?" As a modern person, she still wasn't used to such direct praise, but she was deeply grateful to God for making her part of this warm family. The strange thing was, this world was from a novel she had read in her past life. It was about a girl who could travel between dimensions and became a saintess in another world. Right now, they were on their way to the banquet announcing the Saintess's arrival. She had only read the novel for one reason. The second male lead, from his name to his description, was identical to her husband. The banquet hall was packed with nearly every noble in the empire, and she suddenly felt a little nervous. When the arrival of the crown prince was announced, she saw a man who seemed to have been forgotten in her past. With his handsome face, blonde hair, and blue eyes, he was Crown Prince Jess, the novel's male lead. And the man who appeared behind him had black hair and icy blue eyes, Duke Hill Leapart. It wasn't just his appearance. Even his cold, unapproachable aura was exactly like her husband's from her past life. Even during a deep guiding session, he was always on high alert, his entire body covered in sharp spikes, as if constantly warding off some unknown enemy. The only reason she, a mere B-class guide, had become the exclusive guide for an S-class sentinel was their overwhelmingly high compatibility rate. Before they had even met, she'd had a secret crush on Hill. She was overjoyed to become his exclusive guide, but he didn't seem to feel the same. From then on, their relationship was completely one-sided. When her superior told her that Hill wanted to marry her, she was so ecstatic she couldn't think of anything else. Aylin looked at the man on the high platform. He was as handsome as ever, though he looked a bit younger. A priest announced the entrance of the Saintess. The moment Aelin saw her, she froze in shock. It was her former colleague, Lee Shuyun, the woman who had threatened her more than once to leave Hill. Aelin subconsciously whispered her name. She couldn't believe Shuyun was the main character of the novel. A sharp pain pierced Aelin's heart as she watched her stand beside Hill. It wasn't until her brother called to her. "The Saintess is beautiful, isn't she?" "Yes, she is," Aelin replied. Her brother winked. "But our Aelin is still the prettiest." He was talking nonsense again, but his joke snapped her out of it. With her family by her side in this life, seeing the two of them together didn't seem to hurt as much anymore. Because of this, Aelin didn't notice that while everyone else was looking at the Saintess, Hill's gaze was fixed solely on her. He stared at the girl clapping in the crowd, his eyes filled with confusion. Soon it was time for Aelin's coming-of-age ceremony. As the star named Aelin reached its highest point in the sky, she began to pray. "Oh, star, even though it's been 10 years, I still don't quite understand why God brought me into this novel. But please let my warm, loving family live long and happy lives." A brilliant light radiated from her. In this life, she had finally found the familial love she never had in her past. A family that loved her as if she were their own life. While waiting for the carriage, her father asked what gift she wanted. Her brother suggested a bow and arrow. "Haven't you always wanted one?" Aelin wanted to tell him to shut up, but it was too late. Her mother had heard everything. "You want to buy a bow and arrow?" 10 years ago, the reason she was able to possess this body was because the original Aelin had died, suffocated in a fire. The family had been overjoyed when their daughter miraculously woke up in her coffin, thinking it was a gift from God. Ever since, her mother had been extremely sensitive about her safety, forbidding her from going out alone or touching anything dangerous. "Mother, I'm an adult now. I don't want to just hide whenever monsters appear in our territory, watching Dad and brother go off to fight." But how could her mother bear to let her daughter, whom she'd almost lost once, walk into danger again? As they were at a stalemate, Aelin suddenly fainted, a fever setting in. When she next opened her eyes, she was back in the apartment she had once shared with her husband. The deep guiding session had left her exhausted. Hill brought over a towel and some ice. He sat on the edge of the bed, his voice unusually gentle. "It's still early. Get some more sleep." Aelin was confused. Was she back? Hill stared at the marks covering his wife's neck. "You should wear a high-collared shirt tomorrow." Hill picked up a piece of ice and fed it to her. "This will help cool you down." Aelin chewed on the ice, feeling much better. She mumbled softly that she wanted more, and to her surprise, Hill actually smiled. "Want more?" He popped a piece of ice into his own mouth and leaned down. Unfortunately, it was just a dream, a fantasy she once had about her husband. When Aelin truly woke up, 3 days had passed. When she had collapsed, her family was at a loss, until Hill appeared. He had arranged for a doctor, and even provided them with a portal for travel. She never expected to receive his help here. The fever she'd had was clearly an awakening sickness, a symptom that appears before a sentinel or guide awakens. In the original story, the only sentinels in the Saintess Empire were the Crown Prince and Hill, and Shuyun was the only Saintess. So why had she awakened as a guide? At that moment, Hill was looking at a file containing the investigation on Aelin's family. He had clearly heard her say the Saintess's name at the banquet before the Saintess had even introduced herself. Not only did she know Lee Shuyun, but she had also awakened an ability. Unlike Aelin, Hill had only been back for 2 weeks, returning to a time before he traveled to Country H. But none of that mattered to him. His only goal was to get back to Country H and find Shuxian, his wife, his one and only guide. He would do anything, pay any price just to see her again. After his return, his longing for her was so intense that he started seeing phantoms of his wife. But they were just illusions. Flowers in a mirror, a reflection of the moon on water. He could see her but never hold her. The side effects of his powers, combined with the mental strain, made him start coughing up blood again. A suffocating feeling clogged his throat, a stark reminder that he needed to be guided. But he refused, choosing instead to suppress it with holy water, though even that was losing its effect. At this rate, he might have to accept guiding from the Saintess before he could even find his wife again. He thought of the girl he'd met a few days ago. She always gave him a feeling similar to Shuxian, even though the only thing they had in common was a mole by the corner of their eye. In his past life, Hill hadn't known he was a sentinel. His younger brother had a mental illness, and was kept locked away in a separate wing of the mansion. It wasn't until he crossed dimensions to Country H and saw sentinels with all kinds of abilities that he realized his brother might have been a psychic type. This time he went straight to his brother, Aiden. "You're not sick," he told him. "I'm not leaving you alone anymore." Since he was a child, Aiden could hear other people's thoughts. Whenever he couldn't take it anymore, the servants would look at him with strange eyes. "Young master, we didn't say anything." They would smile on the outside, but in their minds they were calling him a monster. And with their constant denials, his condition only got worse. His brother's story confirmed Hill's suspicion. He was also a sentinel, one with the ability to read minds. Little Aiden was thrilled to see his older brother. Not only was he his favorite person, but when he was with him, he couldn't hear those other voices. Hill explained everything about sentinels, warning him sternly, "Until your guide appears, you absolutely must not rely on any other guide or the Saintess's power." "Not even the Saintess?" Aiden asked. The Saintess held unquestionable influence in the Empire. Before his regression, he too had trusted her. He had followed her through the dimensional gate to Country H, believing her when she said she would bring back a supply of guide essence. He didn't know then that Shuyun had no intention of returning and was just using him. By the time he realized he'd been deceived, he was already trapped by the government of Country H. After they discovered he was an S-class sentinel with dual abilities, they tried to tie him down by forcing a bond with Shuyun, but their compatibility was so ridiculously low that it failed. His compatibility with other guides was no better. At the time, they thought it was because he was from another world, but that all changed when he met Shuxian, his wife. "At first, I really hated her." His brother's voice pulled him back from his thoughts. "Sorry, I was thinking about something else. Anyway, Aiden, I need you to do something for me. Come with me to the Clockshire territory. I need you to read the thoughts of Miss Aylin Clockshire." After Aylin awakened as a guide, her life didn't change much, except that the burn scar from the fire had mysteriously transformed into a flower pattern. And ever since she fainted, her mother had loosened the reins, even allowing her to practice archery. In her past life, she trained to survive. In this one, she wanted to protect her family. The wind on the training grounds was strong, blowing straight at her, but it didn't matter. This was just practice. Aylin drew the bowstring to its limit, her form perfect, and released an arrow. It flew through the air, and just when it looked like it was off course, it suddenly struck the bullseye. Her father and brother stared in amazement. They couldn't believe she'd hit the target on her first try against such a strong headwind. They immediately launched into a stream of compliments, making her blush. She thought maybe the wind had helped, but she was still happy to be praised by her family. What Aylin didn't know was that, high in the sky not far away, a man was watching her with a look of utter shock. Hill had brought his brother to the Clockshire territory, but since there was no direct portal, they had to endure a long carriage ride. His brother had fallen asleep from exhaustion, so he decided to scout ahead alone. That's when he saw it. The girl's archery stance was identical to his wife's from their past life. He froze. Out of habit, the moment she released the arrow, he unconsciously used his power to guide it to the bullseye, just as he had done for his wife countless times before. He had used his ability without even thinking, seeing Shuxian's shadow in her once again. Could two people in the world really be so alike? He trembled with excitement. If it were a coincidence, how could even the small habit of how she touched the bow be the same? Just then, the girl's father looked up sharply, his eyes meeting Hill's. The Baron's gaze was filled with hostility. Crap, he'd been spotted. Hill landed behind the training grounds to meet with him alone. He explained that he hadn't meant to spy. He was just inspecting the border with his brother and happened to see them. After a bit of conversation, the man seemed to believe him. "I see." But then his tone shifted. "Then why were you staring at my daughter?" Hill finally understood the source of the Baron's hostility. He couldn't exactly say he was there to investigate her because she was suspicious, so he tried a different approach. "It was a coincidence. It's rare to see a noble lady practice archery, so I was captivated for a moment. I knew it, and I'm not just saying this because she's my daughter, but she truly has an extraordinary talent." The man's sudden change in attitude left Hill stunned again, but he quickly caught on and played along. "You're right, that's why I couldn't look away." "Right? Right. To have your praise is an honor. My daughter has only been learning for a week and she's already a master." The man might as well have had "Daughter's #1 fan" tattooed on his forehead. Hill thought to himself that he'd found the key to communicating with the Baron. Upon learning that Hill was staying at a nearby inn, the Baron extended an invitation. "If you'd like, why don't you stay with us? Please allow me to repay your kindness for helping us before." Aelin couldn't believe it. The ex-husband she was trying to avoid at all costs had just been brought home by her own father and was now moving in. The young Duke, meeting his sister-in-law for the first time, gave her a peck on the hand. Before she could even pull away, his brother took her hand and did the same. A knowing smile on his face. Aelin's heart pounded. She knew it was just a noble custom, but she still couldn't get used to seeing Hill's face. Hill, ever the gentleman, pulled out her chair for her. Her father, completely unaware he'd invited a wolf into his house, was even more impressed by the Duke's lack of airs. Aelin took a sip of water to hide her embarrassment and fanned her flushed face, completely missing the little Duke staring at her. Dinner ended with the discussion about monsters. Aelin was conflicted. She knew this Hill wasn't her husband, but she still got nervous around him just like before, and she thought she caught a look of interest in his eyes. Why did he have to show up now and mess with her head? If only her family were a bit wealthier, they wouldn't have had to get involved with him over the portal incident. The Clockshire territory was so frequently attacked by monsters that almost their entire budget went to defense, leaving them unable to afford even a portal. Then she remembered something. In the original novel, the Saintess became incredibly popular after introducing some of her hometown's cuisine to the Empire. The Saintess had only just arrived, so if she acted now, she could make a fortune. Meanwhile, Hill had returned to his room, his expression grave. If Miss Aelin was a guide, she should have released some guiding energy upon seeing him, a common mistake for newly awakened guides. But he hadn't felt a single wisp of it from her. This could only mean one thing: she might be a sentinel. He jolted, realizing he'd burned a hole in the sofa. Was it because he kept seeing Shuxian in her that he was hoping she was a guide? But what was he even hoping for? If Miss Aelin were a guide, did he want to receive her soothing? How despicable of him. One day, the Baron invited Hill to observe their training, causing a stir among the knights. Hill was a hero of the Empire, a legend to most of them. Aelin watched Hill. Everyone's first reaction to him was the same. She could understand. She'd been the same way once. Looking closer, she was certain this Hill was younger and far more diplomatic than her husband had been. With just a few words, he made the knights admire him even more. One knight mustered the courage to ask for a sparring match. Having heard that, besides being a powerful sentinel, Hill was also a master swordsman. The Baron, afraid of offending him, was about to stop him, but Hill picked up a sword and agreed without a word. His younger brother stood alone in the distance, wanting to watch but too shy to approach. Aelin walked over and invited the young Duke. "Let's go watch together." From their first meeting, Aiden had taken a liking to this big sister. He shyly moved closer to her. Aelin smiled. It seemed he was nothing like Hill. To call it a sparring match was an understatement. It was a one-sided beatdown. Hill, holding his sword with just one hand, easily deflected his opponent's full-force blow. The knight's arms went numb from the impact, and he was defeated in less than a single exchange. The entire crowd was in shock. The Duke was on another level. Aelin's brother's eyes lit up. "Your Grace, please have a match with me as well." Hill gripped his sword again. "I'd be happy to." Just then, an alarm blared. The knights, well-trained, grabbed their weapons. A beast-tide was attacking. The Baron looked at his daughter. "I'll have knights escort you and the young Duke back to the manor." But before he could finish, a gust of Hill's wind was already there. He lifted Aelin and his brother into the air. "My wind will get you back faster." The two of them had a bad feeling. "Brother!" Aiden cried out in despair as they were blown away like a distant star. The beast-tide, which usually took a long time to quell, was won with ease thanks to Hill's intervention. Everyone present marveled at the power of an S-class sentinel. But the stronger the ability, the more severe the side effects. He coughed up blood again. The pain and dizziness were a clear sign that he needed to be guided. Hill turned and flew away. But his body, pushed to its limit, soon crashed to the ground. Agony racked every part of him. The side effects were worse than last time. He needed a guide. When Aelin landed, she let her guard down for a moment and accidentally released a guiding signal. Aiden flinched, and she realized her mistake. "Are you all right, young Duke?" But Aiden had never been guided before, so he didn't understand what was happening to him. He just knew he didn't want to be separated from Aelin. Aelin asked a maid to take the young Duke back to the manor, but as she turned to leave, the boy grabbed her. Why are you going to the back mountain?" There are monsters out there. I'm just going to check on the situation. But isn't that dangerous? I'm just observing, so it'll be fine. Can you let me go now? He didn't seem to want her to leave. But Aylin couldn't worry about him now. She was concerned about her father and brother. By the time she reached the back mountain, the battle was over. It was finished so quickly this time, Hill must have helped. Should she be grateful that he happened to be here when the monsters attacked? As she was about to leave, she saw Hill lying on the ground. "Duke, are you all right?" There was no response. Suddenly, flames erupted around Hill, shooting into the sky. Activating his powers while unconscious was a classic sign of a Sentinel's side effects flaring up. He needed guiding. If she left him, he'd burn down the entire mountain. Aylin had no choice but to begin. The flames died down a little, only to roar back to life even stronger. His symptoms were too severe. Remote guiding wasn't working. She had to switch to contact guiding. She pulled off her gloves and grabbed Hill's hand. This time the flames finally receded, and his pained expression softened into one of peace. Just as she thought it was over and was about to leave, Hill suddenly grabbed her, pulling her into his arms. Had he regained consciousness? Hill muttered, "Not enough," and then leaned in and kissed her. Aylin cried out in pain. It felt like he'd broken the skin on her lip. She pushed him away forcefully. "What are you doing?" His only answer was to trap her again. Hill leaned over her, and she could sense he was still not fully conscious, which terrified her. She struggled, shouting, "Duke, let go of me!" Just as she thought he was going to bite her again, Hill suddenly nuzzled her cheek gently, whispering something softly. "Shoo, I missed you so much." Just when she thought her husband had recognized her, he passed out. Aylin let out a sigh of relief. Her husband from her past life used to say strange things while being guided, too. She hadn't realized he'd had that habit for so long. But the most pressing issue now was that Hill had bitten her lip. She couldn't let her family see. When Hill woke up, he found himself lying on the back mountain. Strangely, he felt perfectly fine, as if he'd just been guided. The Baron who found him also thought he looked less like he had fainted, and more like he'd just had a good nap. Hill's first thought was of the Saintess, but he quickly dismissed it. This feeling of refreshing clarity was more like Shuxian's guiding essence. He soon got his answer from his little brother. Aiden had tried many times but couldn't read Aylin's thoughts. The boy assumed she was also a sentinel, but what he said next sent Hill into a state of euphoria. When he was with Aylin, he felt a sense of calm and well-being, an effect only a guide could have. Aiden continued, "It felt even better when I held her hand. Though for some reason, I didn't feel anything in the dining hall yesterday." "You held her hand?" His brother's expression suddenly turned terrifying. "Why did you hold her hand?" The pressure made Aiden shrink back. Hill realized he'd lost his composure. "Sorry, I'm just tired." He tried to make his voice calm again. "Can you tell me why you held her hand?" "Because she said she was going to the back mountain, and I suddenly felt like I didn't want her to leave, so I just grabbed her hand without thinking." "Wait, did you just say the back mountain?" After confirming that Aylin had indeed gone to the back mountain, a wild idea took root in his mind. What if God had taken pity on him and let Shuxian be reborn as Aylin, bringing her back to his side? If that were true, all the confusing feelings he'd had about Aylin could be explained. Aylin was his Shuxian. To test this theory, Hill decided to sneak into the Baron's manor. That night, after everyone was asleep, Aylin's thoughts were the complete opposite of Hill's. In this life, she wanted nothing to do with her ex-husband. But hadn't Hill been guided by the Saintess? He was in such bad shape. It was as if he'd never been guided at all. In the original novel, the Saintess guided him and the Crown Prince immediately after she arrived. More and more things were diverging from the original story. In the past, she had been blinded by love. Even Hill's cruel side seemed handsome to her. But things were different now. Her ex-husband was an arrogant and demanding person. What she could never understand was his insistence that she be home whenever he returned. If he found her gone, he would call her relentlessly until she picked up, then track her down and drag her home. But once they were home, Hill would just go about his own business, ignoring her completely. He never told her what he was doing, but he had to know who she was seeing. Aylin despised the part of herself that had put up with that. What was so great about that man anyway? She had even given her life to save him. Late that night, while Aylin was fast asleep, Hill slipped into her room, desperate to prove the girl was his wife from a past life. But the moment his feet touched the floor, she was wide awake. She had been a soldier in her past life, after all. She grabbed the weapon she'd wheedled out of her brother when she first arrived. A comfort for her lack of security, that she never thought she'd actually use. Feeling the intruder behind her, she slashed backward with the blade, but it missed by a hair. It was too dark to see his face. Without hesitating, she attacked again, but this time her wrist was caught in an iron grip. He used the momentum to push her down onto the bed. Just as she was about to scream, the man spoke her name from her previous life. "Shuxian, it really is you. Did you think I wouldn't recognize my own wife's guiding?" Aylin's mind went completely blank. "Why aren't you saying anything?" Hill reached out and touched the corner of her lips. "The evidence is right here." The sensation at the cut on her lip made her falter, and her guiding energy flowed out instinctively. The two of them were instantly connected. The familiar feeling made Hill tremble with relief, his head tilting back in pure bliss. The side effects from years of using his powers vanished in an instant. It was only then that Aylin realized she had guided him. Hill pulled her into a tight hug and began to pour his heart out. "I've been looking for you for so long, my love." To Aylin, he seemed completely insane. She shoved him away, unable to understand how the Hill from this world could know the her from a past life. "Your Grace, I don't understand what you're talking about." Hill stared at her, then broke into a knowing yet crazed smile. "Did I scare you by showing up so late? I'm sorry. I know you must be shocked, but I just missed you so much." Aylin backed away until her back hit the door. Hill blocked her path with his arm. "Where are you going?" He was like a different person, his eyes burning with a crazy obsession. He reached for her face again. "My love, I really missed you." "I just told you. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not the person you think I am." A wave of anger washed over her. In this life, she had finally achieved her dream. She had a family that she loved with all her heart. Why did this man have to come and ruin it? Hill looked stunned. Aylin's voice grew firmer. "My name is Aylin Clockshire, the only daughter of the Clockshire family. If you don't leave my room immediately, I'm calling my father." Hill started to waver, murmuring her past name. She cut him off sharply. "And another thing, if you ever sneak into my room again, I don't care if you're a duke, I will press charges." Looking completely lost, Hill slowly backed away, his body beginning to float. "It seems I was mistaken. My apologies, Miss Aylin." As soon as Hill left, Aylin's legs gave out and she sank to the floor. To be honest, a small part of her was happy that he had recognized her, but that was it. In this life, she wouldn't let him control her ever again. Hill couldn't understand why his wife was rejecting him so fiercely. Shuxian had never looked at him with such cold eyes. It made him start to doubt himself. Was he wrong? Was she really not here? A sharp pain in his palm brought him back. It was the cut the girl had given him. No, he was right. The way she wielded her weapon and the guiding she gave him were proof that Aylin was Shuxian. But why was she denying it? Seeking an answer, Hill started following Aylin around like a puppy the very next day. He made no effort to hide it. Ever since he broke into her room, the man had become her shadow, trailing her everywhere she went without any attempt at subtlety. Aylin was so flustered she couldn't even eat. When she got up to leave, Hill's expression grew even more pitiful. Even her mother was watching them with an amused look on her face. Aylin changed into her riding gear, deciding to clear her head with a ride, only to find the man waiting for her. "If you're going for a walk, could I—" he started, but she cut him off. "No, I was planning to, but then I saw you. And suddenly I don't feel like it anymore." Hill pleaded again, "Just for a little while. Can we please talk?" She had never seen Hill with such an expression. The old her would have never been able to refuse him when he was being so persistent. But now she felt nothing. In this life, with a family that loved her unconditionally, she had learned one thing. She was a precious person, not someone to be thrown away so easily. "If you keep this up, I'll have to tell my parents what happened that night," she said before turning and walking away without a second glance. Hill stood there, stunned, watching her leave. Rejected again. Just then, Aylin's father returned from an outing. "Your Grace, are you heading out?" Hill was surprised to learn that the Baron personally oversaw the territory's defenses. The two men exchanged stories about the battlefield, but then the Baron's tone shifted. "Your Grace, you've been here for a week now. Have you finished showing the young Duke our territory?" Hill understood this was a polite way of asking him to leave. He had been so focused on Aylin that he'd completely forgotten about that. But he couldn't leave yet. "I haven't shown Aiden the whole territory yet. It might take a little more time." The Baron hesitated. "To be honest, Your Grace can stay as long as you like, but my wife—" On his first day, Hill had figured out that the true ruler of the manor was the Baroness. May I speak with the Baroness directly about this? Her father looked relieved. Of course. Actually, my wife is just worried that we aren't providing you with adequate hospitality. Please don't take it the wrong way. As a duke, he could stay as long as he wanted, and the Baron had no right to refuse. But now that he knew Aelin was Shuxian, that made the Baron his father-in-law, and he had to make a good impression. Meanwhile, Aelin, who had gone out to pick flowers, ran into little Aiden. He was on the verge of tears, terrified by a caterpillar that had fallen on him. Aelin calmly picked it off and tossed it away. Are you okay, young duke? It turned out Aiden was just looking for a quiet place to rest. She teased him. You seem to be afraid of bugs. Aiden blushed and insisted, No, I just think they're gross. Don't you think so, miss? To me, nothing is grosser than a monster. Aiden's eyes lit up. Have you seen a real monster? She had seen plenty in her past life, but almost none since she'd been reborn here. Well, I've only seen them in books, but my brother described them to me in detail, so I can imagine what they're like. Aiden looked disappointed. My brother never tells me about things like that. Then you should try asking him. I only found out because I kept pestering my brother about it. Really? You think my brother would tell me too? Of course. I heard he brought you here to broaden your horizons. The Duke must care about you. Even though Aelin said that, Aiden knew his brother hadn't come here for him. He became quiet, said his goodbyes, and quickly ran off. Aelin was confused. What was wrong with the boy? When she got back, she was not expecting to see Hill again. The moment he saw her, his face lit up with an undisguised joy, like a puppy seeing its owner come home. Aelin was unsettled. Why was he with her mother? Hill was beaming. No matter how much the girl denied it, he was sure she was his wife. But he had nearly blown it with his future mother-in-law. To extend his stay at her house, he had acted as he would with any other noble and offered a bag of gold coins, which only managed to infuriate the Baroness. Just as he was at a loss, the girl had walked in. Hill saw her as his savior, hoping she would help him out. But after hearing what happened, the girl just wanted him to get lost too. For her mother, hosting the Duke was an act of goodwill. By offering money, he had sullied that kindness, which had deeply offended her. They may not have been wealthy, but they had their pride as nobles. Just as Aelin was enjoying his predicament, Hill suddenly started playing the victim. He mentioned his powers and how he had accidentally burned the back mountain and the sofa in his room, which was why he felt so apologetic and wanted to compensate them. If word got out that he, a sentinel, had made such a mistake, it would be troublesome for him as well. The excuse, which sounded laughably fake to Aelin, surprisingly convinced her mother. Seeing that his tactic was working, Hill laid it on even thicker. Aelin couldn't believe it. He was describing sentinels who were praised by the world and blessed by the gods, as if they were pathetic creatures. Actually, this is a secret known only to sentinels and the royal family. But since you have shown me such kindness, I see no reason to hide it from you, my lady and Miss Clockshire. Without a guide, a sentinel is nothing more than a defective product. From the moment we awaken, it's like walking through a desert with no water. There's no relief from the thirst, only endless suffering as we trudge across the burning sand. There are only two ways to stop the pain: end our own lives or find our one true guide. Fortunately, I have found mine. Aren't you curious who she is? Just as Aelin worried he was about to say something reckless in front of her mom, her mother, as if she knew what was coming, stood up. Oh, I just remembered I have something urgent to attend to. Please excuse me, this has been a very interesting conversation. Hill immediately got up and opened the door for her. The Baroness was flattered. The men in my family are not nearly as thoughtful as you. When Aelin tried to leave as well, Hill stopped her. Before lunch, can we talk? I just have one question for you. It seemed he wouldn't stop bothering her unless she agreed. With no other choice, Aelin consented. Hill first apologized for his behavior the other night, saying he had reflected deeply on his actions. What did you want to ask me? Aelin asked. Miss, you awakened as a guide after the fever you had at the palace, which means it was very recent. That's what I don't understand. How can a newly awakened guide control her energy so skillfully? And did you know, he said, moving closer, that the moment a sentinel touches a guide, she will start to guide him? They were connected again. Hill's body began to tremble, and then he smiled triumphantly. Just like this. After the man had touched her without permission yet again, the girl was finally furious. She slapped his hand away. So what? Hill stared at his hand, stunned, but quickly recovered. A new guide will automatically release their energy whenever a sentinel is near. But you, miss, even in a sealed room, didn't let out a single wisp. Even with an S-class sentinel right in front of you, you were as calm as if you had already been guided. I'd like to hear your explanation for that. Aelin still didn't understand why the hill of this life was so desperate for her. But she knew one thing. She would never again do what he wanted. I don't know what you're talking about, Duke. If there's nothing else, I'll be going. This time, Hill didn't stop her, because he had realized something he couldn't accept. He knew all of his wife's habits and little gestures, so he could tell at a glance how angry she had been just now. He didn't understand why his wife wouldn't acknowledge him. In the past, no matter where he went, she would follow him with an eager gaze. Aelin's cold attitude sent a wave of panic through him. He clutched at his chest where a sharp pain was stabbing him again and again. All you have to do is admit it. Just say, "You are my wife," and I would do anything for you. While the Duke was busy trying to win back his wife, another sentinel was getting restless. The Saintess had just arrived, and his friend had disappeared for over a month. Crown Prince Jess was starting to get worried. Hill had been the most excited one when the temple announced the prophecy of the Saintess's arrival. Just then, a servant knocked on the door to announce that the Saintess was here. He shot up from his seat, and as soon as she entered, he greeted her warmly. Shuyun, though she appeared calm, was ecstatic on the inside. A man this handsome was being so forward with her. The real reason she was there was because the Crown Prince hadn't contacted her in the 2 weeks since her last guiding session. She used the excuse of being worried about him to make the first move. The people of this world didn't know much about sentinels and guides, so they probably didn't even realize when they needed guiding. As she expected, the Crown Prince was in need of it. "Your Highness, would you like me to guide you?" Jess hesitated for a moment before extending his hand. Shuyun immediately began. This was Jess's second time, and he felt a strange sensation. His body was filled with energy. But for some reason, he felt even more starved than before. He wanted a deeper guiding. As a C-class guide, Shuyun couldn't actually satisfy the needs of an S-class sentinel. Of course, she wouldn't tell the Crown Prince that. She would only tell him that simply holding hands wasn't enough for a complete guiding. Hearing there was another way, Jess grabbed her hand excitedly. This was exactly what Shuyun wanted. She stood up, walked over to the man, and sat right in his lap. Then she leaned in and began the second round of guiding. After he was satisfied, she started scheming about Hill. "Your Highness, besides you, where is the other sentinel?" The normally sharp and decisive Crown Prince, after being guided by the woman twice, was now putty in her hands. "He's away inspecting a territory, I see." She had been hoping to have fun with 2 handsome men. Shuyun's voice was tinged with regret. "So when will he be coming to formally greet me?" "I've been waiting. I'll summon him back at once." "How can we let the esteemed Saintess wait for him?" Getting the answer she wanted, she leaned in and kissed the Crown Prince again. They clung to each other for a long time before reluctantly parting. Jess escorted Shuyun to her carriage. As she was leaving, she was still thinking about the other sentinel. "Will I be able to see him when I visit tomorrow?" "Of course. I will be sure to have a word with him then." Shuyun could tell the two had a close relationship and asked about him. "His name is Hill Leopard. His family were founding heroes of the Empire, and they are the only ducal house." Hearing Shuyun murmur Hill's name, the Crown Prince felt a sudden pang of irritation. He wanted the Saintess to only say his name. He kissed the back of her hand, and only when she looked back at him did he smile in satisfaction. "Please have a safe journey." Shuyun had no idea that sentinels have a powerful, innate possessiveness towards guides, and it was even more intense for their exclusive guide. Shuyun sighed in her carriage. She didn't want to go back to the boring temple, but she couldn't stay at the palace. Before coming here, she had been on a support guide mission in Country H. It was supposed to be a relatively easy B-rank gate, but a massive horde of monsters appeared, breaking the Sentinel's defensive line. As a support guide, no one paid her any attention. As she was running for her life, her phone suddenly rang. When she looked at the screen, she was enveloped in a bright light and transported to this world. That was a month ago. Since she came here through her phone, she figured she'd have to use it to get back. Opening it again, she saw a new app. "What's this? Is that my guide rank next to it?" She clicked on the mission. "Become the first guide in this new world and successfully gather your companions." This new discovery didn't make Shuyun happy. It meant that besides her, there were other guides in this world. She had a feeling that if she wanted to return to her own world, she'd have to complete this mission. But why should she? As the only guide here, she was treated with the utmost respect. If new guides appeared, wouldn't that just diminish her value? In Country H, she was completely ignored, but here, she felt a sense of superiority she'd never experienced before. Why would she want to leave? It was better to just enjoy herself here. Meanwhile, Hill, having received an urgent summons from the Crown Prince, was preparing to leave that night. He looked at his wife across from him, his heart filled with reluctance and sorrow. He had just found his wife. He didn't want to be separated from her at all. Being forced to leave the wife he had just reunited with, Hill felt a deep sense of emptiness and reluctance. Should he just take her back to the capital? But then he thought, what if she ran into the Saintess and the Crown Prince? The Crown Prince was also a sentinel. The mere thought of him taking an interest in Aelin was enough to make Hill radiate a murderous aura. His brother-in-law flinched, thinking his request to visit the ducal estate had angered him. Hill snapped back to reality and quickly assured him they were welcome anytime. He had to return to the capital because of the Crown Prince's urgent summons. Damn it. He had just confirmed that Aelin was his wife from his past life and hadn't even won her back yet, and now he had to leave her again. Aelin, on the other hand, couldn't wait for him to get lost and hopefully never come back. Hill gave up on the idea of taking Aelin to the capital. It probably wasn't a good idea to let his wife meet the Saintess who had bullied her relentlessly in her past life. It was better to let her stay here in the Clockshire territory. This time he would protect her properly. They soon returned to the ducal estate via a portal. As soon as he was back, his brother reverted to his timid self and offered to return to the private wing. He said his goodbyes maturely. "Brother, I hope everything goes well at the palace." Hill's heart ached for his brother. "Aiden, didn't we talk about this on the way back? You won't be hearing all those chaotic thoughts like you used to, so you don't need to hide away in the private wing." Aiden was still hesitant. He was afraid of being disliked and didn't want to cause trouble for his brother. Hill encouraged him again. "It's okay, you have me now." Tears welled up in Aiden's eyes. He was finally no longer alone. The next morning, Hill arrived at the palace. The Crown Prince was all smiles. "You're finally back. So this is the other sentinel? We haven't seen each other since the banquet. It's been a while." Hill's expression was icy. "Yes, it has been a while, Lady Saintess." The Saintess's goal was clear. She wanted both of the Empire's S-class sentinels for herself. But no matter how much she tried to charm him, the man in front of her remained cold, not even glancing her way. "It seems you're a bit different from His Highness. A bit shy, perhaps." Jess laughed to smooth things over. "He's usually like this." But inside, the Crown Prince wasn't laughing. They were both sentinels who had experienced similar pain. Sharing this blessing should have been a happy occasion. But for some reason, the thought of Hill also receiving the Saintess's guiding made him incredibly uncomfortable. The Saintess approached Hill. "You must have had such a hard time. But from now on, let me help you. Please, take my hand." To protect Aelin's identity, he couldn't reveal that he had already been guided, so he had no choice but to accept. Chuyun began to release her guiding essence. "That's right," she thought. "No matter how arrogant, no sentinel can resist a guide's essence." I can't wait to see the expression on the Duke's cold face. But she quickly realized something was wrong. Her guiding essence was just leaking out. At the same time, Hill felt that he wasn't receiving any of her guidance at all. Was it because he had been fully guided by his wife? The combination of her weak ability and the failed connection caused Chuyun's mental energy to start collapsing. She had tried to force the guiding, but she ended up exhausting herself first. The Crown Prince panicked, shouting for doctors and priests. Hill looked on, completely unimpressed. "I'll go get them." It was a good excuse to leave. After ordering a servant, Hill started to think about why the guiding had failed, and he soon discovered a fact that made him ecstatic. His mark with his wife was still active. A mark is a type of contract between a sentinel and a guide, signifying that they belong only to each other. It's the equivalent of marriage for those with abilities. Just as ordinary people take marriage seriously, ability users consider marking to be extremely important. This is especially true for sentinels. Once marked, they can no longer receive guidance from anyone other than the guide who marked them, so they are exceptionally cautious. Before he'd been transported, he and Shuxian were married, so they had definitely been marked. He had been reborn into a time before he traveled to Country H, which meant that at this point in the timeline, they hadn't marked each other yet. Considering that the Shuxian here might remember him, and that their mark still existed, his theory that Aelin was Shuxian was completely solid. At this thought, his desire to see his wife grew even more urgent. But first he had to see the high priest, the one who had received the divine revelation foretelling the Saintess's arrival. Hill wanted to understand the real reason for his regression. After the Saintess failed to guide Hill, the Crown Prince stayed behind to personally care for her, even using his own powers to cool her down. When he learned that Hill had already left the palace, he started to feel that something was off. Hill had always been cold, but his behavior after the coming-of-age ceremony was just too strange to understand. Still, he ordered his subordinate to suppress the news of the Saintess's collapse to avoid any negative rumors about Hill. Shortly after Hill left, priests arrived to take the Saintess away, but he vehemently refused, insisting she stay at the palace to rest. He wrote 2 letters, one for the temple, and another that he instructed to be delivered secretly to Hill. At that moment, Aylin and her mother were bidding farewell to her father. He was leaving for 2 weeks on business, and would help her look for some special ingredients while he was away. After her father left, her brother also said goodbye and headed to the guard post. Her mother smiled and linked arms with her. "Come, walk with me for a bit." They strolled through the backyard. "I have a question. Has our daughter fallen for the Duke?" Seeing Aylin's shocked expression, she continued, "It's all right, I understand. When I was young, I was also fascinated by the nobles in the capital." "No, mother, it's not like that. I don't like the Duke," Aylin said quickly, following her. Her mother sat down lost in thought. "My late grandmother's family lived in the capital. When I first went there, I met a gentleman. I thought all the nobles in the capital were like him, so dignified and proper. I think that was my first love." Aylin was intrigued. So her mother's first love wasn't her father? "But soon after, my grandmother passed away and I had to return home. That's when I met your father." "Goodness, to be honest, I never would have guessed he was a noble. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, whoever our Aylin likes, we will like too. Can my daughter try to stay as close to home as possible?" Aylin finally realized that her mother still hadn't moved on from the trauma of the fire. She hugged her mother tightly. "Me too. I like whoever you like, mother. I want to stay by your side forever." Her mother's smile returned. Aylin's tone then changed. "But you shouldn't assume things like that. When did I ever say I liked the Duke? Aylin, love isn't a bad thing. There's no need to hide it." "No, I really don't like him." Her mother looked at her skeptically. "Then why were you always staring at the Duke?" After being transported to Country H, Hill had read a novel. His wife had read it so many times that it piqued his interest. When he finally opened it, he discovered that the world he had come from was nothing more than a fictional setting. The book also chronicled the Empire's future. In the book, the Hill character was obsessed with the Saintess. When she chose the Crown Prince, he chose rebellion. Since Hill's powers far surpassed the Crown Prince's, it seemed he would win. But in the end, he was consumed by his own ambition, and died after his powers went berserk. Hill found the High Priest of the Saintess Empire, who greeted him as if he had been expecting him. "You've finally come." The High Priest not only knew about his time reversal, but also knew that the Saintess was a fake. He hoped Hill could fight against fate. In his past life, he had been a puppet of fate, and both he and his wife had died tragically. The thought filled him with rage. "Then tell me, what is this fate?" It turned out that shortly after the first divine oracle, God had sent a second, stranger one. "I will give you one last chance. You must find the one who reversed time for the sake of protection and the true Saintess." The High Priest couldn't fully comprehend the message, but he believed Hill would know. With that, he pulled a book from his sleeve. It was the same one that had appeared with the oracle, the novel he had read in Country H. Because the book ended with him rebelling, Hill instantly understood why the High Priest hadn't sought him out sooner. "This book isn't a prophecy, it's just a novel." "But everything that has happened so far has come true," the High Priest questioned. "That can no longer be called the past. It's merely a time that has vanished," Hill explained. "Besides, I have never had any intention of rebelling against the royal family." The High Priest let out a sigh of relief. "Of course, I didn't think you would. Hearing you say it yourself puts me more at ease. I believe that reversing time requires a price, one that likely can only be paid with a life. Duke, only you can follow God's will. Please, you must find the true Saintess. Whatever you need, I will help you." "Then why do you let the fake Saintess run free?" Hill asked. "Because everyone deserves a chance." Even though her daughter said she didn't like the Duke, her mother had sensed it from the beginning. They were drawn to each other. From her observations, like wasn't a strong enough word to describe their connection. It was more like people destined to meet had finally found each other. She didn't dislike Hill, in fact, she was quite pleased with him. But marrying into a high-ranking noble family wasn't something the head of the family could decide alone. The vassals and extended family were crucial parts of the house, and they would never be satisfied with Aelin. A young lady with a scar might even be treated like a pariah. She would never allow her daughter to suffer that kind of humiliation. She could still vividly remember the moment her daughter, presumed dead, had suddenly sat up in her coffin. When Aelin had woken up with vacant eyes, she was like a different person. And every time she saw that puppet-like expression, it terrified her. She wasn't afraid of how different she seemed, but of the fact that she had just gotten her back. She was terrified of losing her again. No matter what, Aelin was her daughter. Even if she had come back to life as a different person, she was still her daughter. Back at the ducal estate while handling his affairs, Hill saw a message from his uncle, who wanted to introduce him to a noble lady to manage his household. He scowled in disgust. His uncle hadn't changed one bit, still trying to marry off his own people to him, just like he had in his past life. Suddenly he froze, a realization dawning on him. Unlike Country H, the Senti Empire was a class-based society. If he could use that to his advantage, he could keep his wife. It would definitely make her hate him, but he didn't care anymore. As long as he could be with her, nothing else mattered. He ordered his steward, "Starting tomorrow, prepare gifts. I'm sending a marriage proposal to the Clockshire barony." The steward was still reeling from the shock. When his master continued, "Pick out some jewels from my mother's vault and find the best dressmaker in the capital tomorrow. I know her measurements, you just need to bring them here." He rattled on. "Should we send gifts to everyone in the Clockshire territory? Since we're doing it, let's make sure everyone knows. Everyone will know that he loves Aelin, and no one will dare to covet her." 10 days later, Aelin and her mother stared in disbelief at the mountain of various items piled up in front of their door. "These are gifts from Duke Leopard, and a letter for you." With that, the man opened a letterbox. It was a marriage proposal. The Duke personally selected these gifts and said he will come to explain the details in person soon. He has to go to the palace, so it will be a few days. Aelin panicked. What was Hill thinking? With him being a duke, her father, a mere baron, couldn't possibly refuse. And the sheer volume of gifts meant he hadn't even considered the possibility of her saying no. "I refuse." When Aelin said those two words, both her mother and the steward were stunned. "I want you to take the gifts back." The steward nervously asked her to reconsider, as he had to carry out his master's orders. Aelin refused again, without mercy. "Then go and deliver my message to the Duke. Until then, these gifts are not coming into my house." He tried a different tactic, saying that since the gifts were valuable, he hoped she would at least keep them for now. Her mother stepped in. "You brought them by carriage, so you can take them back the same way." Seeing that his chances were slim, the steward held out the letter and pleaded, "Then please, at least don't refuse this letter, I beg you." In the end, Aelin only took the letter. The gifts were loaded back onto the carriages one by one. Her mother looked at her. "I'll watch things here. You go back to your room." She turned and left, her grip on the letter tightening. Finally, she couldn't help but curse her damn ex-husband. The man who never even sent her a single text message in the past was now pulling a stunt like this. Holding the letter from her ex-husband, Aelin's mind was a mess. It was supposed to be a marriage proposal, but it didn't mention the proposal at all. Instead, it asked if she was eating well, and if she was still drinking cold water. All trivial, everyday concerns. But these simple words had a real effect on her emotions. Why was he doing this now? When she had craved his love, he wouldn't even look at her. "Don't you know that the old Shuxian is dead?" It was almost as if he loved her now. Aelin watched the departing carriages, and finally came up with a possible explanation. Hill had gotten a taste of her guiding. Especially in the Empire, where guides were extremely rare, he probably wanted her to be his exclusive guide again, just like before, and continue to give him everything. But in this life, having received the unconditional love of her family, she would never go back to that kind of life. Aelin suddenly started to miss her father. As if he had heard her thoughts, her father's voice boomed, calling her mother's name. "I'm home!" Aelin pushed open the window in surprise, wanting to jump down and greet him. Her father looked up at her. "Aelin, my daughter, I'm back!" When she got downstairs, she saw one of Hill's men talking to her father. Since he was the Duke's vassal, her father had brought him inside to continue their conversation. Aelin was worried that her refusal would cause trouble for her father. Just then, her mother called her. "This is Baron Iren from the neighboring territory. He came back with your father. Let me see you. You must be Aelin. It's been a long time. You've grown so tall. I can't believe you're already a young lady. Aelin greeted the elder. Had they met when she was a child? Person walked over from a distance. Father, the luggage from the carriage has been unloaded. Where should I put it? The newcomer was Baron Iron's son, Morgan. Baron Iron told his son to greet them. My goodness, the little rascal from back then has grown up so much. The elders started chatting animatedly about them. The dark-skinned young man cleared his throat nervously. Miss Aelin, you've changed a lot too. The elders immediately started gossiping. Oh my, look at you two, all grown up and acting so formal with each other. Morgan, don't you remember Aelin? You used to be a regular here when you were little. The young man looked flustered. No, it's just that the miss has changed so much, so it's a bit awkward. The Baroness didn't let him off the hook either. You were shocked to see the little girl who used to follow you around calling you Big Brother Morgan has grown up to be so striking, weren't you? Had she really called him that? The Baron suddenly turned to her. Aelin, don't you remember either? She paused for a moment before replying. I'm sorry, to be honest, I don't really remember. The Baroness stepped in to explain. Oh, that's right. Our Aelin was very sick as a child, so she doesn't remember much from that time. Morgan said it was all right. He was just happy to see Aelin so healthy now. Then her mother suggested they give them a tour of the garden. The Baron extended his hand. Then allow me to escort you. Even if Arthur scolds me later, I can't let a lady walk alone. Aelin could tell their families were close, perhaps even closer than she had imagined. But ever since the incident, her mother hadn't invited anyone to their home, probably to protect her feelings. Morgan, what are you doing? Hurry up and escort Aelin. The Baron's shout snapped him back to his senses. The dark-skinned young man nervously wiped his hands on his clothes, then offered Aelin his arm in a perfect formal gesture. Miss, would you allow me to escort you? Aelin accepted with a thank you and started to lead the way, not noticing that Morgan's ears had turned bright red. While they were catching up, he suddenly mentioned the carriage parked at the entrance. Is that Duke Leopart's? You know the Duke? Aelin didn't want to get into her history with Hill, so she just said that the Duke owed her father a favor. That only made Morgan more enthusiastic. He's on good terms with the Duke? That's just like Mr. Arthur. Seeing Aelin's confused look, he explained, You might not realize it since he's your father, Aelin, but to us knights, Mr. Arthur is a hero. Aelin's ears perked up. You're saying my father is a hero to the knights? Morgan froze for a second, mesmerized by the way she was looking at him with wide, curious eyes. Well, he stammered, launching into a rambling explanation of swordsmanship. Even though she didn't catch all of it, Aelin got the gist. Her father was incredibly skilled, and swordsmen could apparently use something called sword aura. She suddenly noticed that Morgan was sweating buckets and offered to get him a glass of ice water. But Morgan insisted he wasn't hot. But you look exhausted. Did you carry too much luggage? The young man shook his head again, saying he was fine. Then why are you sweating so much? If you're not hot, are you feeling sick? As Aelin reached out to touch him, Morgan jumped back in a panic, his whole body burning up. Could you excuse me for a moment? He blurted out before rushing away. Aelin smiled as she watched him go. He was built like a bear, but he was as clumsy and flustered as her father. Wait a minute, she thought, looking down. Why are Morgan's footprints so deep? Even for someone that big and strong, the ground shouldn't be dented like that. It looked exactly like the kind of mistake a newly awakened physical-type sentinel would make. She needed to be sure. She asked Morgan's father if his son had been suffering from recurring fevers lately. The man looked shocked. Aelin, how did you know? Her mother was surprised, too. Our Aelin had a fever recently as well? Baron Iron grew worried. Could there be some kind of infectious disease going around? Just then, Morgan returned. Baron Iron scolded him. You there. How could you just run off and leave Aelin alone? Father, we can talk about that later, Morgan said quickly. I saw a guest was about to leave. Baroness, shouldn't you see them out? It was Hill's steward. After they saw him off, Aelin looked at her father. What did you two talk about? I've never seen you look like that when you're usually so cheerful. Did he threaten you? Her father suddenly roared. Is that thief trying to steal my daughter? Aelin jumped, startled for the 10th time that day. Don't worry, sweetheart, I'll protect you. I was wrong about the Duke. I never thought he could be so shameless. Her father's reaction made Aelin smile. He was still the same as always. After hearing the full story, Baron Iran laughed. Arthur, don't you think you're being a bit harsh on the Duke? I don't care if he's a duke or the crown prince himself, I'm not handing my daughter over to anyone. As Aelin was about to ask her father about the spices he'd brought back, Morgan started coughing violently. He clutched his chest and doubled over in pain, a classic sign of a sentinel's powers awakening. Ever since his high fever, these episodes had become frequent. They'd seen countless doctors, but no one could find the cause. Aelin was almost certain now. It was the awakening sickness of a sentinel. But in the original novel, the only sentinels and guides in the Empire were Hill, the Crown Prince, and the Saintess. Now, not only had she awakened, but a new sentinel had appeared as well. Baron Iron asked for someone trustworthy and discreet to look after Morgan. Just as the Baroness was about to suggest the headmaid, Aelin stepped forward. I'll take care of him. Once everyone had left the room, she didn't hesitate for a second and began guiding her childhood friend. Because Morgan had been deprived of guiding energy for so long, the process took a very long time. It was made even harder by the fact that their compatibility was low, forcing Aelin to use far more energy than when she guided Hill. But she was glad he had collapsed here. If he had gone berserk somewhere without a guide, he might have been lost forever. When Morgan woke up, he remembered having another attack, but this time he felt different. His body was incredibly light. Maybe you should rest a bit more. Looking at his concerned friend, he realized something. Ever since he first saw Aelin again, his headaches would lessen and he could breathe easier whenever he was near her. He remembered his father saying that Aelin had suffered from the same symptoms. My father said you also had a high fever, is that true? Yes, about a month ago. Did you get stronger too? I know it's rude to ask a lady that, but I'm just so curious. Aelin smiled and said yes, but she had no intention of telling him she was a guide. I didn't get as strong as you though, so you should still be careful. Morgan had thought he was the only one going through this. He'd even hurt people by accident because he couldn't control his new strength, and it had made him feel terribly lonely. Now, knowing Aelin had gone through the same thing, he knew he shouldn't be happy about it, but he couldn't help the feeling of relief that washed over him. But I hope you can keep what's happening to me a secret for now. The young man nodded immediately, assuming she just didn't want to worry her parents. With that, Aelin began teaching Morgan how to control his strength. Treat every object like it's a teaspoon. Try to pick up this pillow gently. Morgan took the pillow. It went well for a second, but then he tore it in half. Feathers exploded into the air. The young man's face turned beet red as he stammered apologies, only to get a mouthful of feathers and start sneezing uncontrollably. This was a disaster. He'd embarrassed himself in front of Aelin again. The girl couldn't help but laugh. It's okay, she comforted him. Let's go practice outside, I'll help you. Once again, he felt his heart start to pound uncontrollably. Meanwhile, Hill had been in the palace confronting the fake Saintess. He had no intention of being polite to the woman who had wronged him in his past life. But his friend, the Crown Prince, was completely wrapped around her finger. He had even used an urgent military summons just to get Hill to come back and apologize to her. And now she was still putting on a show, clinging to Jess and saying it was all okay. Hill's gaze grew colder. After meeting with the High Priest, he had been trying to figure out how to gently tell the Crown Prince that the Saintess was a fake. Your Highness, forgive my bluntness, but I don't see why I need to apologize. Isn't it strange? Why doesn't the Saintess's guiding energy work on me? You know as well as I do that a true Saintess should be able to share her guiding energy fairly with all sentinels. It's what we were taught to expect, what we've been waiting for. Have you forgotten? The Crown Prince paused. Thinking back, Hill hadn't done anything to the Saintess. Why had he been so angry with him? Sensing the tide turning, the fake Saintess quickly interrupted. It was my mistake. Hill seized on the opening. So you admit it was your mistake, Lady Saintess? Damn it, she thought, realizing she'd misspoken. I wasn't feeling well that day. It's probably because I still haven't adjusted to this world. I told you not to push yourself too hard, Jess said, concerned. I'm sorry, I failed in my duties as the Saintess. She looked at Hill, but his eyes were filled with nothing but pure disgust. She flinched and looked away. Shuyan couldn't understand why Hill, a sentinel, was so unconcerned about the safety of the Empire's only guide. She couldn't let the conversation end on her mistake. I miss my home and the food there. I've been so focused on adjusting here that I've neglected my health, and I think it's starting to take a toll. Jess immediately promised to have the palace chefs prepare food that suited her tastes. Shuyan took the opportunity to release some of her guiding energy. As always, sentinels found it hard to resist. Seeing his friend was a lost cause, Hill knew there was no point in continuing the conversation. Since the Saintess herself admits it was her mistake, then I have even less reason to apologize. Jess started to rebuke him angrily, but Hill cut him off. Your Highness, I am a duke of this nation. The Saintess's previous actions were nothing short of slander. To know it was her mistake and only reveal the truth now is an insult to the royal family. Shuyun was terrified. That's not it. Once I've recovered, I will prove that I am the Saintess. Jess stepped in front of her. That's enough. She's unwell. You don't need to be so harsh with her. I don't want to be. However, I expect you to settle the matter of your previous summons, Your Highness. The farce finally ended with the fake Saintess apologizing. Seeing his friend so thoroughly deceived filled Hill with a nameless rage. Honestly, he wanted to push the fake Saintess to the brink. But right now, the most important thing was winning back his wife. This time he decided to take his brother with him. Aiden's face was glowing with joy. Brother, I can't wait to see her. Hill smiled. Me too. He just wanted to hold her as tightly as he could and feel that she was real. But when they arrived in the Clockshire territory, they were greeted by his apologetic steward. I'm sorry, Your Grace. She rejected the marriage proposal. The proposal had failed, and little Aiden couldn't understand why his big sister Aylin had said no. But for some reason, when he heard the news, he didn't feel sad for his brother. Hill had planned to visit Aylin the next day, but his powers suddenly showed signs of going berserk, even though they had been stable when he was near her before. He had no choice but to change his plans and find her immediately. But when he arrived, he froze at the scene before him. Aylin was laughing and talking with a strange man. She handed him a tree branch, which he snapped in two, and she laughed even harder. The sight sent a jolt of jealousy through Hill. Who is this man? How can he make Aylin laugh so freely? Morgan keenly sensed an intruder in the air. He'd been discovered. The dark-skinned young man stepped in front of Aylin, throwing the branch at Hill like a weapon. In his hands, the ordinary branch flew like a sharpened spear, but it shattered against an invisible wall of wind just before it reached its target. It was Hill's wind ability. That range, precision, and power. Hill immediately knew his opponent was either a master swordsman or a physical-type sentinel. Couldn't be a master swordsman, he would have known. That meant there was another sentinel near Aylin. The girl now realized who was in the sky. Before she could react, a gust of wind lifted her off her feet. In the blink of an eye, Hill had swept her up into the air. Aylin was about to protest, but Morgan, not recognizing Hill, was shouting in alarm from the ground. She tried to tell Morgan she was fine, but Hill clamped a hand over her eyes. A sentinel's animosity toward their own kind is instinctual. He glared at the man who was so friendly with Aylin, and Morgan stumbled back in fear. Hill's lips moved, and though no sound came out, Morgan saw the words clearly. She's mine. Aylin struggled. Duke, what are you doing? Let me go! Hill didn't answer, instead flying them far away. He moved with incredible speed, finally setting her down gently in a forest clearing. Only when Aylin's feet were on solid ground did he remove his hand from her eyes. Aylin's mind was in turmoil. She still didn't understand how Hill had recognized her. But if he knew she was Shuxian, he shouldn't be treating her like this. Seeing his wife refuse to look at him, he called her name sadly, gently reaching out to turn her face toward his. Her tightly shut eyes stung his heart. He had missed her so much. He wanted to hold her, to touch her, and so he did. Aylin tried to pull away, but he pulled her back, even wrapping her in a current of wind to lift her up and bring her closer to him. Aylin's guiding energy began to flow out of her uncontrollably. She was a guide, and she couldn't fight her instincts. Her mind was screaming no, but her body was already guiding him. She wasn't Shuxian anymore, but the moment she opened her eyes, it was as if she became her past self again, the one whose world revolved around Hill. After a long moment, Hill finally let her go. His voice was deep and tender. I missed you. I really, really missed you. Aylin was determined not to respond. But when Hill whispered, I'm sorry, the walls she had built around her heart crumbled. All the pain and resentment from her past life erupted. Who do you think you are? What gives you the right to treat me like this? You were so cruel to me before, so why are you clinging to me now? But unexpectedly, Hill's face lit up with crazed joy. Because this meant Aylin had finally, with her own words, admitted she was his wife. Even if she kicked him, hit him, or spat hateful words at him, he was overwhelmed with joy, a foolish grin plastered on his face. Aelin stared at her seemingly insane husband, and in the next moment, he pulled her into a hug. But the two of them were feeling completely different things. She pushed him away forcefully. Let's get one thing straight. We died. That means our relationship is over. To me, you're just my ex-husband. So stop calling me your wife, take back your proposal, and stop making things difficult for my father. You're saying I'm just your ex-husband? Hill completely panicked. Even after being reborn, he had always thought of her as his wife. Chixian, I can't accept that. Enough! Stop calling the name of someone who doesn't exist anymore. What do you want? He stubbornly called her wife again. I said, Aelin corrected him sharply, I am not your wife anymore. He couldn't accept that his wife was abandoning him. He grabbed her arm and pleaded, give me a chance. I'll make you fall in love with me again. The girl was getting tired of this. Impossible. I'm not the same Shukshin I was in the past. The things I couldn't do for you then, I can do them all for you now. I don't want them anymore. I'm begging you, Shuxian. Aelin shook him off. I'm telling you again, stop calling me that name. Hill suddenly unleashed his wind ability, sweeping her into his arms once more. Just as Aelin was about to yell at him, she saw a massive boulder crash into the spot where they had just been standing. In the distance, a figure was charging toward them. It was Morgan. Aelin, are you okay? I'm fine, Morgan. The interruption sent Hill into a rage. Leave it to a physical-type sentinel to be so stupid. How dare you interfere with my conversation with my wife? He shot toward Morgan. Morgan, startled, ripped a tree from the ground and threw it at Hill with all his might. Hill didn't even bother to dodge. He just held out a hand, and the massive tree stopped in midair before being flung back at Morgan. Seeing he couldn't get out of the way in time, Morgan punched it, shattering the thick trunk into splinters. Aelin shouted, Stop it! Both of you, calm down. I'm fine, Morgan. Seeing his wife looking at the other man, Hill's jealousy boiled over again. The first time he'd met Morgan, he had been angry, but he had held back. This time, however, his wind became like blades, cutting bloody lines across Morgan's body. A physical-type sentinel stood no chance against an elemental type. Aelin had noticed from the start that he wasn't using his fire, which meant he didn't intend to kill Morgan. There was still a chance to stop this. Hill, he's my guest. Stop it. If you don't stop right now, I'll tear up your letter and throw it away. The moment she finished speaking, the flames in Hill's hand vanished. He whipped his head around, his ferocious expression replaced with an urgent, hopeful one. The letter? You didn't burn it? The man's eyes were filled with anticipation, as if he were a completely different person from the one who had just been fighting. I was going to, I just got busy and forgot. The puppy's ears drooped. It's okay. I'll write you more. No, even if you send them, I won't read them. And are you kidding me right now? Hill looked dejected and started to bargain. If I spare that annoying sentinel, will you keep my letter? That depends on my mood. Just promise me you'll keep it. The image of his wife from their past life overlapped with Aelin once again. He couldn't describe the complicated emotions swirling inside him, but he knew that as long as they were both alive, there was hope. He finally smiled. You're right. I'll just have to keep writing to you. His fighting spirit was rekindled. He shamelessly begged Aelin, Wife, just give me one more chance. Shut up, don't call me that. What if Morgan hears you? Hill instantly blocked her view, pulling her into a hug. Don't look at other men. Even if you don't admit it, I still think of you as my wife. I'll be good to you. Everything I failed to do before, I'll do it for you now. So can you please just give me one more chance? Even though she had admitted she was Shuxian, she had absolutely no intention of repeating the past, not even for a second. In this life, I want to marry a man like my father. No, I want to marry a man my parents approve of. So if you want to be with me, you need to convince my family, not me. Hill was overjoyed, thinking Aelin was giving him a chance. In reality, the girl had only made the demand because he had already left a terrible impression on her parents. Getting them to accept him now would be nearly impossible. Soon they were back on the ground, and Aelin rushed over to Morgan. Seeing her so worried about him infuriated Hill, but he told himself he had to hold it in. She had just opened up to him. He couldn't do anything to make her hate him again. Morgan was groaning as he came to. The moment he saw Aelin, his cheeks flushed pink. But in the next second, he was knocked out again by another flying rock. Hill turned his head away. Other sentinels are an exception. Aelin glared at him. Are you insane? The man was completely unrepentant. You're just figuring that out? Hill suddenly moved closer, took her hand and nuzzled his face against the back of it like a child. I'm just so happy to see you again. Aelin remembered what he had said earlier. I'll make you fall in love with me again until you only have eyes for me. By the time they returned to the manor, it was already dark. Morgan's father started toward them, but then he recognized the man in front of him and knew he couldn't act rashly. Hill's expression was cold as he dropped Morgan on the ground. Only then did the Baron rush forward to hold his son. Your Grace, I demand an explanation. What is going on here? Hill's actions had infuriated Aelin's father, but he didn't seem to care. I hope you won't misunderstand. How could anyone not misunderstand this situation? That's why I'm asking you not to. He had injured someone and was still acting this arrogant. I simply don't understand how you could harm a guest in my home. And why did you take my daughter? If this is because we rejected your proposal, while that was unfortunate, he brought this on himself. What do you mean? Baron Irene, did you know your son is a sentinel? What? You're saying my son is a sentinel? Sentinels are also called espers. They act impulsively when they encounter their own kind, sometimes even showing hostility and attacking. He must have awakened recently because the moment he saw me, he attacked me. I was simply defending myself. Aelin was speechless at his smooth talking. While she felt bad lying to her family, telling the truth would mean revealing that she had possessed this body. From what I can tell, your son is a physical type esper. These injuries are nothing to him. He'll recover quickly. Just then, Aelin's father spoke up again. Then why did you sneak into our home? Just like last time. What, he snuck in before? Hill started to look guilty. Well, I didn't mean to. It seemed there were things she didn't know. But Aelin still tugged on her father's arm. Dad, let's get Morgan inside and treat him first. Her brother stepped forward to help. Baron Irene, let me help you carry him. Aelin, you should go back to your room. She turned to leave, but Hill grabbed her arm. He had just been reunited with his wife. There was no way he was letting her go so easily. Don't worry, he'll be fine. I'll come see you tomorrow. Her father now saw him as nothing more than a villain trying to steal his precious daughter. Your Grace, do not touch my daughter. And it's no use coming to see me, because I will never give you my consent. To protect his daughter, her father would no longer back down. Even if the man was a powerful duke, he would not allow Hill to continue harassing her. At the words, never give you my consent, Hill's world, which had just started to mend, shattered again. He could only watch as his wife walked away. Her father escorted her, muttering protectively, "You must have been so scared." Honestly, if two grown men want to fight, they should just fight. Why did they have to drag you into it? The ever-changing plot and the appearance of a physical-type esper, who wasn't in the original story, made her deeply uneasy. How could she possibly tell them, actually, your daughter died a long time ago? I'm a stranger who has taken over her body. While she couldn't admit her identity just yet, there was one thing she could do. Dad, if Morgan is going to recover quickly, he needs me. After explaining to everyone that Morgan was indeed a sentinel, she removed her gloves and walked to his bedside. If you want to heal him, you'll need my help. Aelin, what do you mean? Guiding energy flowed from her hands, surrounding the two of them in a holy light. The wounds on Morgan's body began to heal at a visible rate. Everyone stared in shock. The continuous guiding was physically draining, and her brother had to support her as she swayed. It had taken even more out of her than when Hill had collapsed, but she didn't have time to recover. I need to tell you all something. After my fever, I gained a strange ability. I can't explain it, but I feel a mission to help espers, and I instinctively know how. She looked at Morgan. Although physical-type espers had strong regenerative abilities, his instant recovery after receiving just a little guiding was rare. Could he be an A-class? Aelin, what is that? It looks like a Gisela rose. The girl looked down and saw that the rosebuds tattooed on her arm had all bloomed. The pattern had appeared after her fever. What's wrong, Aelin? I'm not really sure. Her brother was worried. Does it hurt? Should we take you to the temple? Aelin froze. If she went to the temple, they would discover she was a guide, and she would definitely run into Shuyun. She didn't want that. I'm fine, brother. I'd rather not let anyone else know about this for now. Her mother noticed her discomfort. Aelin, you don't have to worry. If you don't want anyone to know, then we'll keep it a secret. Right, Baron Irene? The Baron immediately gave his assurance. We won't breathe a word of this. Don't you worry. Thank you. If you'll excuse me, I think I need to go rest. Her brother helped her up. I'll walk you to your room. As he was about to leave, he patted her gently to comfort her. Don't worry about anything. Just get some rest. Aelin couldn't help but ask, Brother, am I going to cause trouble for our family? Aelin, what are you so worried about? Is it because you have the power to help espers, or is it because of the Duke? She wanted to say both, but she had another question that she couldn't answer. Why had she become a guide when the Saintess was supposed to be the only one? Oh my, I can tell you have a lot on your mind. Don't think about anything and just rest. Don't you trust our parents? No, of course I trust them, more than anyone. Good. Then my little sister has nothing to worry about. Now get some rest. The next day in the palace, Shuyun took a sip of tea and wanted to spit it out. She would have much preferred coffee to this strange concoction. I want to be alone. You may leave. After the maid left, she took out her phone. She still couldn't figure out how to use the strange app. Seeing the battery was almost dead, she worried that if this kept up, she might never be able to go back. It was all that strange Esper's fault for wasting her time. So what if he's a duke? Even the crown prince doesn't treat me so casually. Why didn't her guiding work on the duke? Just then the phone's screen changed. A black hole appearing in the center. A system window popped up. Do you wish to return to Earth? When Shuyun saw the prompt to return to Earth, she didn't hesitate to tap confirm. Even when the system warned that an equivalent incident will occur here in exchange for your return, all she cared about was that it wouldn't affect her. A portal opened, and though the pitch-black void was terrifying, her phone was about to die. So she jumped in. And just like that, the Saintess vanished from the Saintess Empire. On the other side, Hill's attempts to win back his wife were met with another obstacle. He wanted to see Aelin before he left. The young miss is resting, and with the master away, no one is allowed to enter. Despite the steward's rude tone, Hill didn't mind. He politely asked where the Baron had gone. When he learned he was at the guard post, he prepared to take his brother there. He held out the flowers he had brought. The flowers are innocent, at least. I hope you can give these to her for me. The steward was surprised. He had expected his attitude to anger the Duke, but he showed none of the arrogance typical of nobility. During their conversation, Aiden had read the steward's mind and confirmed he wasn't lying to them. Knowing Aelin was safe and sound, Hill's face softened into a happy expression. He ruffled his brother's hair. Aiden, as long as you're with me, no one can deceive me. His brother beamed. I'm glad I could help. He should have treated the boy this way from the start, but in the past he had been so neglectful. Not just to him, but to his wife as well. He would not make the same mistakes again. Soon they arrived at the guard post. As he was explaining the situation to his brother and preparing to visit the Baron alone, a huge explosion echoed from outside, followed by a violent tremor. A bad feeling washed over him. Aelin woke up to see the flowers Hill had sent. The maid was surprised. There's a black rose in here, was that a mistake? She noticed that even the thorns had been removed. He probably put it there on purpose. Honestly, he was never this thoughtful before. The same explosion rattled the manor. The little maid cried out and covered her head. What's happening? When Aelin ran outside, she saw the servants scattering in panic. A horde of strange beasts was surrounding the manor. What on earth is going on? A familiar voice rang out. Don't stop! Everyone, keep moving! Morgan spotted Aelin. A massive number of monsters had appeared out of nowhere. He was about to tell Aelin to get to the shelter when a huge monster locked its eyes on him. Just as he thought he couldn't dodge in time, a flash of light struck the monster. It was a good thing she'd brought her bow to deal with any emergencies. Morgan ran over to thank her. My father told me you saved me. It was nothing. You're an Esper. You're not that easy to kill. You seem to know a lot about us. Aelin froze. I just read about it in a book. By the way, do you know where my mother is? The Baroness is guiding the residents to the shelter. When Aelin arrived, she saw her mother working tirelessly, ignoring her own safety. She could tell her mother was scared, but she was still putting the people first. Her mother was truly an amazing person. Just then, her mother saw her. As she was about to frantically call for her daughter to go back to the manor, danger appeared. Aelin followed her mother's gaze, and what she saw nearly rooted her to the spot. Her heart pounded in her chest. Why is that thing here? Most large monsters had low intelligence, but not this one. It knew humans feared it, so it would roar just to intimidate them. It could also summon other monsters. And with its voracious appetite, it would devour anything in its path, human or monster. Back in Country H, every encounter with this creature had resulted in the deaths of many of her colleagues. She didn't know why a monster from Country H was here in the Saintess Empire, but if it was the same one, she had to buy everyone time to escape, or the consequences would be dire. She asked Morgan to guard the entrance to the shelter, then turned and hugged her mother. "Mom, thank you, and I'm sorry." She pushed her mother away and ran in the opposite direction. With a few quick leaps, she scaled a high wall and used her momentum to launch herself into the air. Just as her mother loved her, she loved this family. That was why she had to protect the people of Clockshire and her family. Her blade plunged into the monster's right eye. It wasn't a fatal blow, but it would buy her some time until her father and brother arrived. The monster roared in pain, shaking its head violently. "This is bad," she thought. "I'm going to be thrown off." And sure enough, she couldn't hold on for long and was sent flying. Is this how it ends? A pair of strong hands caught her. Hill had finally arrived, flames erupting from below him and incinerating the monsters around the shelter. "You were always like this in the past, so reckless." Aelin was shocked. "How did you—" The man smiled at her. "Protecting your own guide is every Esper's mission." The horde of monsters was quickly wiped out by Hill's flames. Soon after, Aelin's father returned. He watched the Baron of Clockshire tear through the remaining monsters with a savage grace, and felt a chill. "What am I going to do if my father-in-law is a sword master?" Aelin scoffed. They weren't even married yet, and he was already calling him father-in-law. With her father's return, the monster tide was quickly suppressed. Leaving her father and brother to clean up, Hill took her back to her room. She looked at the man. Thanks to him, the monster attack had been dealt with easily this time. But was it really okay for him to use his powers so freely? Sure enough, the next second, Hill took her hand and slipped off her glove, pleading, "Please, just a little guiding. Give me your hand." This time, it was just a simple touch of their hands. Even with their different power levels, their 99% compatibility rate was more than enough for a simple guiding session. After he felt better, he looked at Aelin. "Thank you, I'm fine now." The rest of his words caught in his throat as the girl blushed and looked away. He whispered, "Wife." "Don't call me that." He said it again, "Wife." Just as she turned to protest, Hill leaned in and kissed her cheek. Aelin jumped back in surprise, but he had already stood up. "You should get some rest. It's been a long day." The moment the man turned to leave, Aelin grabbed the collar of his shirt and kissed him forcefully. Hill's eyes widened in shock. Then a feeling of pure joy washed over him as he wrapped his arms around her. A guiding energy, far more potent than when they held hands, flowed into his body. He couldn't hold back any longer and gently pushed her down. Aelin let out a small cry. In the next moment, she realized he wasn't making any further moves, just looking at her with a complicated expression in his eyes. She could feel his feelings for her, but her own mind hadn't changed. She didn't want to repeat the past. But if they were going to continue this relationship, should she share with him the secrets she could never tell anyone else? If she did, could she finally find an answer to these conflicting emotions? The next day, her father appeared before her first thing in the morning. "I heard from your mother. You didn't run from the monster. You fought it and almost got into serious trouble. Thank goodness the Duke arrived in time. Come here and give me a hug, my brave girl. I'm so proud of you." Her mother's voice drifted over. Weren't you going to give her a stern lecture? She always felt guilty when it came to her mother. Even though her actions were for the good of the family, she knew it must have brought back the painful memory of almost losing her. But if her family and the territory were in danger again, she knew she would do the same thing. "You did well." Her mother's voice was carried to her on the wind. "Even from a distance, I could see the results of all your hard work and training. You were reckless this time, but as a member of the Clockshire family, I am proud of you." She had been prepared for her mother to scold her or ground her, but instead, she had accepted her willfulness. "Thank you, Mom. I was praising you. Why are you crying?" "I guess I just finally relaxed." Her brother walked over to her. "It seems Aelin has inherited our family's bravery. From now on, I'll help you with your archery practice every day." A round of applause came from nearby. "If that's the case, I'm a pretty good teacher myself. Why don't you let me help?" As Hill told his story for the first time, Aelin realized that there might have been a misunderstanding between them. Her father refused the Duke's offer to help train his daughter. She had never seen her dad be so firm, and she hadn't seen Hill look so dejected in a long time, so she found herself following him without thinking. Little Aiden was shifting nervously in the crowd, so she called out to him. He looked like he'd found a lifeline, but nearly tripped in his haste to get to her. Aiden was not doing well at all. Aelin had a sudden thought and told him to go rest in the carriage. She turned to Hill. Is your brother an Esper too? Hill froze. What? That kind of baseless suspicion towards others is a common trait of psychic-type Espers. Hill didn't try to hide it from Aelin and admitted it was true. Really? But the book didn't mention that. She had said it without thinking. But Hill went along with it. After I crossed over, I became the main character. I've read that book too. Aelin was stunned. You've read that book? Yes. Back in Country H, I saw you reading a book Shuyun recommended. I thought it must be popular. So I read it and found out it was about the Saintess Empire. Of course, most of it was nonsense. It said Shuyun was the only guide in the Saintess Empire, and that as an Esper, I was obsessed with her and wanted to possess her. So I started a rebellion against my rival, the Crown Prince, and died after my powers went berserk. I was basically the villain in that novel. He was smiling as he described a story that ended with his own death. This was the first time Aelin had ever heard him talk about himself. Why would Shuyun recommend that book to him? In Country H, it was just a novel, but in the Saintess Empire, the events of the book were becoming reality. Did Shuyun ever think about how Hill would feel knowing the contents of the book? Or was she trying to pass it off as a prophecy to control him? She had never thought Shuyun would cause Hill so much pain, but if it was true, then maybe Hill wasn't smiling in Country H not because of her, but because he couldn't. A jerk, she couldn't help but curse. Who, Shuyun? Aelin didn't know how to explain, but her reaction made Hill burst out laughing. Fine, let him laugh. Sorry, I shouldn't have, but you really haven't changed at all. Anyway, you should keep a close eye on the young Duke. In the past, most psychic-type Espers were either sent to be spies or they just disappeared. I just wanted to let you know, Hill called out to her. As she looked back questioningly, he suddenly wrapped his arms around her from behind. He buried his face in her neck and whispered, I know what you're worried and scared about, but don't pay it any mind. This isn't Country H, it's the Saintess Empire. From Hill's trembling hands, Aelin could feel how worried he was about her. He was right, this wasn't Country H. She had just seen a monster from there and gotten confused. Aelin, I know you're not Shuxian anymore, and I understand why you've been rejecting me. But what's important is that I don't want you to suffer because of the past anymore. Even though I've decided to accept that you are Aelin, those reasons can't push us apart. You are the daughter of the Clockshire family and the future Duchess. And He lifted a strand of Aelin's hair and gently kissed it, then looked up at her seriously. I'm a fool who can't live without you. She had heard something similar before. In her past life, after she became Hill's guide, she was always following him around. But Hill was very resistant to her guiding. How long are you going to follow me? His tone was harsh, but held a strange sense of defeat. Do you think I'm some fool who can't do anything without you? No, I just... Ha, Hill sighed. Fine. At the time, she couldn't understand why Hill was always so defensive. Now she thought she was starting to get it. Didn't you say you weren't a fool before? Although she had decided not to mix this place up with Country H, there was still a question nagging at her. In the book, only Shuyun was the Saintess, but here she had also become a guide, and Aiden and Morgan had become Espers. Did that mean more people here could become Espers and guides? If they went berserk like Hill had in the past, wouldn't they die for nothing just because they didn't know there were guides who could heal them? A voice pulled her from her thoughts. Morgan appeared, blushing. I have something I want to tell you. Do you have a minute? Morgan had brought a newly awakened person with him. A little girl peeked out shyly. Morgan had sensed her presence while searching the Clockshire territory. I felt a similar aura from this child as I do from you. Hello, my name is Roz. Morgan tugged at his collar. He had been feeling hot ever since they arrived. Are you okay? It's not because of me, is it? No, it's not because of you. Seeing Morgan's reaction, Aelin was almost certain. She bent down and smiled at the girl. Roz, while everyone is cleaning up the territory, would you like to stay at my house? In another manor in the Clockshire territory, Hill was straightening his clothes in the mirror, but nothing seemed right. He ripped off his cravat. This isn't a banquet. This is too stuffy. He opened his closet, and though it was full of clothes, he felt like he had nothing to wear. He needed to see a tailor. Maybe I should go now. His brother pushed open the door. Brother, I'm here. Hill saw that he was all dressed up. Are you going out? Boy's eyes lit up. I'm going to see Roz. Are you going to see Miss Clockshire, brother? Thinking of the girl, this was the first time he had seen his brother invite someone over on his own. Me aside, you've been going out a lot lately. The head butler is going to worry. Little Aiden's face fell. You're right. But then Hill smiled. I'm just kidding. Just make sure you take a knight with you when you go out. Although he worried about his brother, the instinct to be drawn to one's own guide was something no one could stop. By the way, brother, I can finally read Baron Clockshire's thoughts. Hill was surprised. Not long ago, Aiden couldn't read the minds of people stronger than him, like him and Aelin, or the high-ranking knights. He was genuinely happy to see his brother getting stronger. You're growing, Aiden. But I don't plan on reading Baron Clockshire's thoughts. Why not? Aren't you going to see him today? With your help, I could definitely win the Clockshire family's favor, and Aelin would probably reconsider. But that would be cheating, and not very charming. Besides, I want you to use your ability for more important things. When the time comes, I'll ask for your help. Though Hill acted carefree in front of his brother, he was actually a nervous wreck, with no idea what they were going to say when they met. Speaking of which, this place didn't look like it had been invaded by monsters just a few days ago. That must be thanks to Baron Clockshire's leadership. Monster attacks were common in Country H, but the Saintess Empire hadn't seen one in over a decade. If he had been even a moment later, the consequences would have been unthinkable. The memories of his past life felt like they had happened just yesterday. He had almost lost Shuxian again. If that had happened, he would never have been able to forgive himself. In his past life, after he married Shuxian, the missions from the Awakened Alliance became increasingly harsh. He had tried to protest their unreasonable demands, but the only response he got was a cold threat. You got married recently, didn't you? He was no longer alone in this world. No matter what happened, he had to protect his wife. He couldn't lose Shuxian like he had lost the Saintess Empire, so he had to keep his distance from her to make them think his wife wasn't important to him. But he never imagined he would hurt her so much. That all sounds like excuses, doesn't it? Even after all that, Shuxian had still sacrificed herself to save him. He hated himself, so how could the reborn her not? Aelin fighting the monsters herself probably wouldn't be a one-time thing. In the past, she had also personally fought monsters to protect him when he took on dangerous missions. Who are you trying to protect this time? Your family, the people of your territory, or both? He didn't know, but he was certain that he wasn't included in the list of people she wanted to protect. At this thought, Hill smiled. He was jealous of his past self. It's strange. My past life was filled with nothing but painful memories. But when I think of my wife, I feel a sense of longing. He missed Aelin so much. The man's first official marriage proposal was rejected by the girl's entire family. Facing a row of scrutinizing glares, Hill took a sip of tea to hide his awkwardness. He'd been less nervous meeting the Emperor. Where's Aelin? My daughter is resting. She's been exhausted these past few days. Hill looked alarmed. Is she unwell? Her mother nodded. She's been frail since she was a child, but she's fine now. That was a surprise. In his past life, he had also treated Shuxian like a delicate guide at first. After all, it was a sentinel's instinct to protect their guide. It wasn't until he saw her carrying heavy objects with ease that he remembered someone had told him she was ex-Special Forces. But why was she so frail here? The more he thought about it, the more worried he became. Maybe he should get her some restorative medicine. Your Grace, are those flowers for Aelin? He had forgotten he'd brought them. May I give them to her myself? But the Baroness just called for a maid. He had expected as much, but facing it directly, he realized he was even less welcome than he had thought. The Baroness spoke again. There's something I'd like to ask you, Your Grace. Why are you proposing to my daughter? Is it because she has the ability to help espers? He knew they probably wouldn't believe him if he told them about their past life. So he decided to be direct. It was love at first sight. His words unexpectedly pleased the doting father. You too, Your Grace. Our Aelin is very beautiful. Actually, it was love at first sight with my wife too. A spitfire? But the doting father shut his mouth. Your Grace must know that love alone is not enough for a noble marriage. Even if you have feelings for her, what will your family think of Aelin? Are you worried my vassals will object to my choice of a partner? I'm just being realistic. Society is not kind to nobles from the countryside. And Aelin is known as the flawed lady with the burn scar on the back of her hand. The moment she finished speaking, Hill slammed his fist on the table. Who dares to say that? I'll cut their heads off on the spot. The nerve. Even so, it's hard for us to fully trust your words. Her mother's voice trembled. Aelin is my precious daughter. Though she almost died as a child, she grew up to be a bright and wonderful person. She cares more about her family than anyone else. If you had a child like that, would you be willing to give her away so easily? I'm not ready to let her go. Seeing the situation take a nosedive, her brother suddenly spoke up. Sorry to interrupt, but I have a different opinion. The Baron scolded his son. Are you trying to oppose your mother? Of course not. You're all missing the most important point. Does Aelin like the Duke enough to want to marry him? At that moment, Hill felt like he'd been struck by lightning. Aelin had told him to get her parents' consent, and now they were pushing the decision back to her. Looking at his future in-laws agreeing with their son, he had a feeling he might never get to marry his wife in this lifetime. But at least he hadn't been completely rejected. I understand your positions. I will get Aelin's consent myself. I hope you can trust me because I will never give up on Aelin. After Hill left, the family finally relaxed. It really does look like love at first sight. He seems completely smitten. At that moment, Aelin was quietly looking out the window. Hill soon arrived at her door. After she gave him permission, he entered the room. On the table were the flowers he had sent. Hill stared at them, stunned. He had thought she would throw them away as soon as she received them. Just seeing them there was enough to lift his gloomy mood. Aelin was a little exasperated by his foolish expression. Did your talk with my parents go well? Hill snapped back to reality. It was all right. Are you feeling better? I'm much better after resting. So did they give their permission? What? Weren't you here to propose? In a way, his proposal had failed again. So not knowing how to answer, Hill ran. Aelin, I just remembered. The Crown Prince has summoned me. I'll be right back. You get some rest. Seeing Hill so obviously avoiding the topic, Aelin was furious. What did you say? And stop wasting your powers on things like this. Otherwise, she would be the one who had to give him guiding later. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince in the capital was demanding his return to the palace. As a pillar of the Empire, it's not right for you to be away from the capital for so long. Do I have to personally come to the Clockshire territory to see you? All because the Saintess had recently disappeared again. He knew Shuyun must have used her phone to travel back, but he didn't want to go back for such a trivial matter, especially when Aelin had said that if he wanted to marry her, he had to convince her family first. Right now, the person who was most on his side was his future brother-in-law. He was just about to consider using him to win over Aelin's family when the young man spoke as if he could read his mind. If you're thinking of asking me to persuade my parents in exchange for a duel, I'm going to have to refuse. Of course, I'll support whichever man my sister chooses. Aelin told him to convince her family, and her family said they would respect Aelin's wishes. They really were a family. Hill felt a pang of jealousy. In the past, she had been his only family. Just then, he heard a girl's laughter from nearby. Hill, who had just stepped out, quickly ducked back behind the wall. Wait, why am I hiding? But who was Aelin talking to that was making her so happy? When he saw who the man was, and noticed the friendly atmosphere between them, his mood, already soured by the repeated failed proposals, hit rock bottom. They chatted about Roz and the little Duke, and then Morgan suddenly mentioned Hill. I heard Duke Leopard comes to the Clockshire territory every day. She had no idea what Hill was up to lately. I suppose so. But Morgan, you have some cream on the corner of your mouth. Is it gone now? A little higher? Since coming to this world, she had always said she wanted to marry a man like her father. But when she was with Morgan, who was so similar to her father, she only saw him as a brother, not a lover. A sharp pop interrupted them. Pardon me. Hill appeared before them. He handed Morgan a handkerchief. Use this. Morgan took it, but when he tried to thank him and give it back, Hill wrinkled his nose in disgust. You can keep it, Aelin pouted. The guy couldn't even pretend to be nice. But why did he have to show up now? She hoped they wouldn't start fighting like last time. Aelin! The dark-skinned young man suddenly called her name. The Duke's interruption almost made me forget what I wanted to tell you. Excuse me? This guy dared to say he was interrupting them? When I first became an Esper, I was always breaking things, but recently I've been able to control my strength much better. So your control has improved, right? The method you taught me was really effective. After I started imagining everything as a teaspoon, I got used to it quickly. I'm glad I could help. How did you know all that? It's like you can see the future. You're flattering me. I don't have that kind of ability. I also heard it was your idea to secure the spice trade rights with the Kingdom of Yulia. Because he had promised Aelin he would behave, Hill was trying his best to hold it in. But why was she always angry with him and so pleasant with this guy? When Aelin agreed to visit Morgan's territory in the future, Hill's last thread of reason snapped. Why did she have to smile at him like that? He turned to Morgan. "Excuse me, are you close with Miss Clockshire?" A smirk played on the young man's lips. "You didn't know, Your Grace? My family and the Clockshire family have always been very close. Me and Aylin, too. Our parents even considered arranging a marriage for us." Hill looked at him in disbelief. "What did you say?" Morgan looked at Aylin. "Of course, it's not too late for that now." Hill's world collapsed again. He didn't want to believe it, but Aylin's expression told him that the young man was telling the truth. Morgan didn't forget to add more fuel to the fire. "That's what I think anyway. I wonder what Aylin thinks." Not wanting to put himself at a disadvantage, Hill came up with the idea of using what he knew about her past preferences to get rid of Morgan. Aylin stared blankly at the food on the table. Even though Hill had made it for her himself, she couldn't bring herself to eat. In the past, he had never cared about what she liked, but now he was constantly making her remember. Hill, who was in the middle of a competition with Morgan, suddenly noticed Aylin had left. He got up and followed her. "Aylin, wait! Why are you angry this time? Was the food not to your liking?" The more he chased, the faster the girl walked. Her past name slipped out. "Shuxian! You have to tell me why you're angry so I can—" "Let go of me!" Her sharp rebuke made him freeze. Hill slowly let go of her hand, his heart filled with dread. In the next moment, he panicked, because Aylin was crying. "Do you think I'm a joke?" "What? Wait, I'm so confused." "Aylin, I just wanted to make you your favorite food. I didn't mean anything else by it." "Then what is all this?" Hill didn't understand why she was so upset. "Aylin, I just want to talk to you. I don't want to fight." Do you even know what it means to cater to someone's tastes? It means staying by their side quietly, giving them what they want when they reach for it, and disappearing when they wave you away. But you? Do you have any idea how annoying it is to be constantly reminded of a past you're trying so hard to forget? I told you I didn't want to see you, but you keep bothering my family under the guise of a proposal, coming and going from my home as you please. Always embarrassing me. Answer me, Hill, did I ever ask you to do any of these things? Stop pretending that everything you do is for my sake." Hill was speechless. After a long silence, Aylin spoke again. "Your Grace, since you haven't received my parents' permission anyway, please don't come here again. This is my final request and warning to you." In her past life, she and Hill rarely argued. She only remembered one really bad fight. It had been raining heavily that day, just like now, and the reason for the fight was that he hadn't come home all night without a word. She had just wanted him to observe the basic courtesies between a husband and wife. But all he had said was, "Don't talk about things you don't understand." A relationship that was never normal from the start was bound to end eventually. What was there to hold on to? "Aylin!" Hill's voice came again. "Your Grace, if you keep this up, I'll—" The words died in her throat when she saw him. Hill was kneeling in front of her. "What are you doing? Get up!" Hill hung his head. "What am I supposed to do? To you, I'm just your ex-husband now, right? I know it's hard for you to let me back in. It wasn't intentional, but I know I hurt you a lot in the past. Can't you give me a chance to be forgiven? You probably think I'm shameless, but even if you blame me, I'm confident I can change your mind. But now you want to completely erase me from your life." "I didn't want to say something so pathetic. I'm sorry." "I was wrong. I'll spend my whole life atoning for it. If you want me to kneel, I'll kneel. If you want me to crawl, I'll crawl." He reached out a hand to Aylin, his voice filled with desperation. "You can blame me however you want, as long as it makes you feel better. So please, just don't erase me from your life." Love makes the proud bow their heads and the rational go mad. Faced with the man kneeling before her in apology, Aylin was conflicted. Because she knew Hill so well, she couldn't ignore the sincerity in his heart. But the words of forgiveness were stuck in her throat, unable to come out. She reached out and wiped away his tears with her fingertips. Hill's voice was cautious and laced with anxiety. "Shuxian, if you do that, I'll get the wrong idea." When had she ever seen Hill so timid? On an impulse, she hugged him. Hill was so shocked he was about to speak. But Aylin stopped him. "Please, don't say anything." She closed her eyes. "I'll listen to you." From the moment Hill had shown his weakness and opened his heart to her, Aylin knew she couldn't not forgive him. When two people who are already in love begin to face their feelings, they rush to prove something to each other. Hill kissed Aylin urgently. "Wait, this isn't right, The feeling of his hand on hers made her pause, and in that moment of distraction, he kissed her again. It wasn't until the guiding energy inside Aylin began to overflow that he pulled away. Hill gently stroked Aylin's cheek. Even though they were so close, he still felt like she was miles away. He had known for a long time why he couldn't bridge the emotional gap between them, but facing it still scared him. If he pushed further, would he just end up hurting Aylin again? Make her run away from him once more? But he felt like this was his last chance. Wait, Hill, are you crazy? Shuxian, I'm about to say something very selfish. If you leave me like this, I'll be heartbroken. But I'll try to understand because I love you. It's what I've always wanted to tell you. I'm so sorry it took me so long. He then laughed self-deprecatingly. I'm pathetic, aren't I? Stumbling over such a simple phrase. What was he so afraid of? Aylin turned her head away, suppressing the fluttering in her heart, and resolutely reached out to push him away. I still can't trust you. Hill, give me some more time to think. It might take a long time, and the answer might not be what you want. Even so, are you willing to wait? Although Aylin hadn't directly forgiven him, not pushing him away was a good start. Don't worry, waiting is my specialty. He had considered himself Shuxian's property for a long time anyway. Hill's pursuit of his wife was finally making progress. But things weren't going so well for the Crown Prince. With the Saintess's disappearance, Jess was becoming more and more irritable. Where is Duke Leopard? I heard the Clockshire territory was attacked by monsters. He is unable to return immediately. That damn bastard? Your Highness, you shouldn't use such vulgar language. Jess had been grinding his teeth in frustration over Hill lately. He didn't even care that the Saintess was gone. Is he possessed by a demon? What's so special about the Clockshire territory that it's changed him so much? Send a message to that damn Duke. I'm going to go deal with him myself. The attendant was confused. Where are you going, Your Highness? Where else? I'm going to the Clockshire territory right now.